Bend It Like Beckham is a 2002 romantic comedy sports film that Time magazine flatteringly calls a dramedy. It follows main character Jesminda, who's on a mission to make it big in the footballing world despite her family's other ideas. With a classic is she gay, is she not mix up, absolute tunes throughout, and comedy gold such as this line:
Lesbian? Her birthday's in March. I thought she was a Pisces.
It's nothing short of pure joy. Bend It Like Beckham is a lot of things. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and peak Keira Knightley.
Kevin can shag whoever he bloody wants.
It was even a musical as well. But one thing it is not is a tearjerker. Why then, on an episode of This American Life from back in 2011, did self-confessed non-crier Brett Martin list it as one of the many films that has made him cry? Why is it joined on that list by other titles such as Daredevil and Sweet Home Alabama? Because Brett Martin watched those films on a plane, and he's far more likely to cry when he's on a flight than when he's not. Meaning you can use the phrase dry land to compare the land to both the sea and the sky. But Brett Martin isn't the only one to become Wet Martin on a flight. The This American Life episode continues with interviews with other individuals who've all had unusual teary experiences. One woman cried while watching Freaky Friday with no sound on someone else's screen. Even Chrissy Teigen cites it as a problem she has. Judge Chrissy Teigen, no less. The more you look into this phenomenon, the more the anecdotal evidence piles up. A survey carried out by Virgin Atlantic on their Facebook page found that around 55% of those who responded said that they feel more emotional when flying. This led to Virgin putting a warning announcement before some of their films, alerting the passengers to the fact that they may end up crying during them. I think the thing that's actually most likely to make me cry is seeing this announcement. Absolute nightmare fuel, or nightmare mule, as the case may be. In terms of the findings though, you can't really get more anecdotal than a Facebook survey, and so I wondered if there was any scientific reasoning for this phenomenon. Why is it less snakes on a plane and more heartbreaks on a plane, lip quakes on a plane, aches on a plane? Well, while surprise, surprise, there isn't tons of peer-reviewed research on this topic specifically, there are a few theories that have some sound reasoning and some sound research behind them. The causes for this heightened emotion, in more than one sense of the word, can seemingly be split into three overlapping categories: the impact of the environment, the psychological state of the flyer, and the physiological state of the flyer. Environmentally, as all the examples so far have highlighted, a lot of this emotion seems to come forward when watching an in-flight movie. Played on a small screen in front of you, if you're choosing to watch it, you really have to focus. Putting in headphones also adds to both the immersion and to the commitment that you're giving to the film. Essentially, if you're flying on your own, what else is there really to do other than commit yourself fully to what you're watching? This commitment and focus means even the most basic and simple of films take on a new importance that they may not have had before. There's this piece written by Stephen Groening, who's a professor of film and media studies at George Mason University. He really dives deep into the unexpected intensity of the in-flight film experience. And if you like reading people talk eloquently and enthusiastically and passionately about topics that seem completely random and irrelevant, then I really recommend giving it a read. And even though he calls Bend It Like Beckham bland, you know, no one's perfect, we all have our faults.
Kevin can shag whoever he bloody wants.
But being focused on a tiny screen isn't enough to make you suddenly start blubbing at happy japes or rom-coms. There's more to it than that, and that's where the psychology of being on a flight comes in. Getting on a plane is a stressful experience. Whether you're a well-worn traveller or not, there's going to be things that are consciously or subconsciously having an effect on you. From the stress of arriving on time and getting through security okay, to that underlying wondering in the back of your head of will you actually land all right, to the sadness over leaving behind a place or people you love, to the concern over what awaits you when you arrive. There's all sorts of stresses at play, both large and small. Tears are the product of powerlessness and are common when we're dealing with some kind of loneliness or feeling of separation. And where are you going to feel more powerless and potentially more lonely and potentially more separate from the rest of the world than in a metal tube floating in the sky? And as I've said, whether consciously or not, perhaps that is almost too bizarre a concept to get your mortal brain cells around. Perhaps on some level, being on a flight is just too much for your little self to handle or even understand. This can leave you in a somewhat unsteady psychological state, especially if, again, you're flying on your own. In that situation, you're kind of bunched up close to a load of strangers, really physically close to them, but really far away from the people that you love. It's no wonder then that tears, at films at least, come from moments of emotional relief. There's a build-up of tension when you're wondering if everything's going to be okay, mirrored by the build-up of tension that you have in real life, and then whoosh, suddenly it is resolved, as is the way of many plots, and the tears come along with that relief. One bizarre example of this is when one bloke, also interviewed for This American Life, cried at a credit card advert. In the advert in question, a man lost his wallet and it seemed like he wouldn't be able to travel any longer. But don't worry, American Express told him it was all fine and he could continue travelling as normal. Upon seeing this, professional film critic Steven burst into tears. He really felt relief from that second-hand safety. It's not just moments of relief from credit card adverts that make you cry though, there's also bits in films that are just generally heartwarming. If something acts as a reminder of our loved ones who are far away, then it's also more likely to make our eyes soggy. Jodie DeLuca, who's a psychologist who takes a keen interest on the impact of high altitudes on our psychology, summarises it with this quote. She says, "Emotions govern our lives more than we know, and our environment influences our emotions more than we realise." And I really think that's true. I think we really underestimate the impact of the low-level emotional disruption that everyday activities put on us. Not just flying, I don't regard flying as an everyday activity, but in other places we're really bad at recognising it. The whole COVID crisis is something that's brought that to my attention, but that's a different story. So your psychology, it's safe to say, is in a slightly unusual state, but there's also some physiological changes that tie into our propensity for being overly emotional on a flight. Whilst the impacts of high altitudes have primarily been studied in the mountains, a lot of what we've learnt through that can be applicable on planes too. Firstly, the higher up you go, the lower the air pressure becomes. This means there's less air in the same amount of space because the air particles are more spread out. Having less air around us means we breathe in less oxygen, and having less oxygen in our body leads to something called hypoxia. Science word, hypoxia, where hypo means low levels and oxia means oxygen. With less oxygen getting around your body, including to your brain, this starts having some effects on you. Hypoxia makes us more vulnerable to the effects of physical and psychological changes, meaning this bizarre environment of being on a flight is getting amplified. Symptoms of hypoxia itself include fatigue, impaired decision-making, and, listen out for this one, a reduced ability to handle your emotions. Couple those symptoms with the dehydration that we also experience on flights, and that levels up your irritability and low mood. Triple that with the other jarring aspects of being on a flight, like numb taste buds and popping ears, and it's no wonder that you're more likely to feel fed up and emotionally vulnerable. So with those three pieces of environment, psychology and physiology in place like a miserable Triforce, the vast membership of the Mile Cry Club or the Whale Cry Pub starts to make a bit more sense. The intensity of the film watching experience, coupled with the intensity of your emotions at that time, governed by the psychological and physiological changes that your body is undergoing, mean that films of a particular and light-hearted genre end up getting pushed into genres and categories that are more likely to make your eyes a bit moist. Bend It Like Beckham becomes a dramedy. It's not just about a young girl who wants to play football and her friend who fancies their coach. It becomes a tale of a young woman's battle between her familial expectation and accepting her long-term passion. It becomes about the delicate balance of teenage friendships and how they're torn about and ripped apart by love. And it becomes about the hopelessness of cultural expectation and how it muddies and mixes with how we interpret and accept who we actually are. See? I'd cry at that. And whilst I'm always pro a good cry, despite there not being much evidence for the chemical benefits of it, points to video link, if you don't want to be spotted crying, then don't worry, Kaylee Rizzo has written an article about how to avoid that happening. With such top tips as such: picking a window seat, wearing a hoodie, going to the bathroom, using a sleep mask, flying at night, pretending to sleep, I am asleep, and of course, faking a sneeze. That's it for now though everyone, I hope you've enjoyed it, and as a non-frequent flyer but a very frequent crier, I'd like to hear from those of you who are the opposite, or those of you who are both. Do you think there's much behind this being more emotional on planes? Also, a lot of the things I read and looked into were about films, but If a rubbishy film makes you cry, what about a rubbishy book? Is it the same? Are you as emotional when you read? Please, I want some comments on this and some other people's viewpoints. I would love those. Otherwise, like this video if you like it, share it if you share it, subscribe it if you subscribe it, tweet me or Insta me if you want to do that. And all that's left to say is thank you so much for watching, have a lovely day, and remember, it's all cool to mewl. And a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons. I love y'all. A special shout out to Adam Dullinger, Terry Cox and Justin Brown. I feel like you can definitely hear that, surely. The psychology of the passenger and the physiology of the passenger. On a plane. The more you look into this phenomenon, the more the anecdotal evidence piles. There's a plane going overhead. You've got a comment. Thank you. I am asleep. That's the end. Here's a playlist of my faves, here's a video I picked out just for you, and here is a link to my Patreon if you want to get some more stuff. Thanks team, bye!